This is my Tenhulzen four-wheel alignment system setup. So, basics. Obviously, doing your own alignment, you want the car suspension loaded, but also up in the air enough to slide under it and make your adjustments. So what I did, there's videos on this, I made box cribbing to load up the suspension, but keep it up in the air enough for me to slide under with the creeper, of course. Second, I needed platforms for the string frame. I'll get into that in a minute. The string frame, that is. I took a 2x4s and I drilled this 3/4 inch wood. Let's see if you can get angled under there. I drilled this 3/4 inch wood into a 2x4 and slotted it into the box cribbing that I have here. And then also turn plates. I used polycarbonate sheets with some grease in between them, and that allows the wheel to turn and slip without dragging on the wood. It helps remove any I guess preload in the tire. As you drop it, that tire is able to scoot out and about as it needs to. So, as mentioned, Tenhulzen Automotive. This is the four-wheel alignment system. So, a bunch of paperwork comes with it, all the nuts, bolts, and everything you need to set it up. I got the 2 gauges, makes things a little bit easier. You get 4 things of paper. So, just getting right into it, you have your order of operations here after setting everything up, of course. So obviously the first thing you want to do is check your tire pressures. I've already done the front end alignment on this car, and first thing I did obviously was tire pressure. Ride height, corner balance. I am on stock suspension for now, no coilovers just yet. I just need to get the car roadworthy first. Adjust caster. So caster is a strange thing on here. So to adjust your caster, if you can use another object. I use the strings that come with the kit. Not sure if you can pick it up. There it is. So if you're going to use that, first thing you need to do is set up the string frame and set it up to be parallel with the body of the car. So the way you do that is you obviously assemble the string frame. You set your width of the frame. You got 2 adjustment knobs there you can use, and then you can slot the frame as needed. I have it labeled for easy reference. I have it set 81 inches from edge to edge. It just needs to be wider than the car, and it says you want the outside of the tire in line with that center bolt there. And once you do that, once you at least eyeball it, take a ruler, or some other sort of a measuring device. You square up the strings to be equal front to front, rear to rear, but not front to rear. So front needs to match front, rear needs to match rear, but rear does not need to match front. So right here, I'm at about 140 millimeters. Over here, it's 140 millimeters. I've already squared it up. In the rear, 149 approximately. So a couple things have changed in the meantime since the last recording. I basically finished up aligning this car. I got different wheels on with some 20 mil spacers. So some of the values aren't necessarily the same, but just for demonstration purposes. Also, the car is now on the ground, and getting it up onto the box cribbing and mounting, all that stuff, I mean, that takes time. So just to keep it short and sweet, we'll just assume that I, hadn't made the alignment adjustments as of yet. But anyways, so there was one thing I forgot to mention in the prior recording that I had. So after, of course, I continue off, match front to front, rear to rear. I've done that now. I've adjusted the tire pressure on these different wheels. I squared up the string frame, so front matches front. Another thing to really pay attention to when you're squaring them up is if you're off, say, I go millimeters because it's easier for me to process it, just whole numbers. I don't like fractions. If you're, say, that side is at 138, this side is at 140, well, obviously that means you need to move the string closer to the car. You gotta divide by 2. So if that's at 138, this is at 140, that's a 2 millimeter difference. But you gotta understand, since this is rigid, you're not moving this whole frame over that way 2 millimeters, otherwise that side will now be at 138 and this will be at 140. So you gotta take that value and cut it in half. What I always do, and which I'm not sure if I mentioned in the last video, is I take the value that I have over here. So, for example, you might not be able to see, but that's at 135. No, yeah. 135. So the other value, if these are still squared up, I hope they still are, it's at 132. So actually I might need to adjust this. Let me double check over here. So for example, make sure you're measuring from the same place. I'm measuring from not the center cap, but from the wheel hub itself. Over here I'm at 135. I may actually have to square up the front a little bit. I'm at 135 on that side. On this side, I am at, 132. So what I can do, instead of scooting back and forth over and over again, 135 plus 132 equals 267. Divide that by 2. You're finding the average value between the two, and that's what you'll square it up to. So 133.5 approximately. That means you get to make your life a little bit easier. Move these out of the way. I'll get to those in a second. You can only adjust, or you can stay on one side and adjust from that one side. So that was 133.5. So I can take this, put it on the hub. I'm landing at I bet I was measuring incorrectly. That's at 130 right there. It's at 132, so still I can make an adjustment. So 130 plus 132, obviously you average those out, what you're gonna get is 131. So I'm looking for 131 on both sides. Because it's rigid, I only need to know that I'm hitting 131 on one side, because naturally on the other side I know I'll be at 131. So right now I'm at 130. I need to make that 131, so I need to move it towards me. Just a tiny little bit makes a lot. We're working in millimeters, not inches. Round about 131. Hey guys, future Matt here to just note something else. I'm editing the footage right now. You can square up the front and be okay. So I think it was 131 up front. When you square up the rear, say it's 145 in the back, 145, 145. Once you make the rear squared up, guess what? You've now slid the frame, and the string is going to move as well. You can see it here. So once you squared up the rear, guess what? You have to go back to the front again. You need to square up the front again, because chances are it's not going to match, but you're getting closer. So square up the front again. You've squared up the front, you've moved the frame, therefore you've moved the string. You get to come to the back again, make sure that's squared up. Just keep doing that back and forth, and eventually you will get it squared up and you'll get it okay. So, for example, after multiple repetitions over and over again, I have the front at 131. I have this side at 131. If you bump any of the string frame corners, guess what? You're starting almost all the way over. I have the rear at 138.5 approximately. It's a little dark over here in this corner. Hopefully I'll be able to pick it up. At about 138.5. So front matches front, rear matches rear, but you gotta play with it. It takes time and repetition. Frankly, it took me a few hours the first time to really get them squared up, and it takes time. You'll eventually get it. Just keep playing around with it. If it takes hours, it takes hours. Once you get the hang of it, you'll get the hang of it, and you'll really fully understand what you're doing, and you can get very precise with making the adjustments, knowing and understanding that a tiny bit of that frame movement translates into, relatively speaking, a lot of movement of that string. So just be precise, take your time, be patient, go back and forth, keep squaring it up. Eventually you will have it squared up, and then you're set. One thing I think Adam Daly mentions in his video, he uses clamps. I actually had bought clamps, and on the platform, so what I was planning on doing was taking the clamps and doing what he does, and I would clamp the frame down to the platforms that I have over there. Unfortunately, I left the clamps in the shopping cart at Lowe's, so left Lowe's without my clamps that I had spent $14 on, or $15. But if you do that, it helps it to where if you bump the frame, you have less chance of it shifting around on you. So just another tip there. Shout out to Adam for that one. First thing we want to do obviously was tire pressure, and then ride height, corner balance. I already covered that. Tire pressures on these tires are good. Ride height is, I mean, it's on stock suspension, so that's what it is. So I need to adjust caster. So for caster adjustment, let me go ahead and set this up. You want the frame, make sure this is in frame. You want the frame not in this orientation, you want it in this orientation, vertical. Actually, you know, that orientation. You got your 2 fingers and then your 1 finger. So what is recommended is to not let that slide down on you. And once you've squared up the strings, I mean, realistically, you can, as long as the strings are at the same height and you set them to the same height, you'll be fine removing them. It'll be okay. And I may not have touched on that, but they're notched and they have different height settings. You can see little cuts in there, and the string is stretchy. It's very, very stretchy, and it slots into those cuts. That wasn't the frame, that was that. Anyways, so with that out of the way, it makes this a little bit easier. So what you want is, when you're setting this up, this adjusts like that via a, I'm trying to get in frame. You have a T-style nut there. You want to adjust this to where the 1 finger, the bottom finger in this case, is almost in line with the rim of the wheel. So the top 2 are obviously going to sit on the rim. Notice how I'm saying rim. The rim of the wheel, like so. The bottom finger you want it to come just even with the rim itself. I'm making my adjustment here off camera. I just eyeball it when I'm making my adjustments on the slider on here. So those top 2 fingers are in. Give them a nice little press. And then this bottom one, you can see it's not quite on the lip. That's what you want. You want a little bit of tension. So you pull down on it slightly and then push it in. And it goes in. And then make sure it's fully seated. That one's seated, that one's seated, and that one down there is also seated. All right, so that is how you set up the actual gauge. Now, what we also have, let me not forget the string. The string is necessary for this. What was I at, 6? I'll have to make sure I match that up. Sorry. 6, I think. Make sure you always have those matching. I'm at 6. Okay, so we're in good shape. So that's set up as such. It's mostly vertical. String is back attached. Everything, the string is squared up and everything. So, yeah, what I need to do next is the actual camber gauge itself. You can take that, zero it out. Zero it out. Alright, so that's zeroed out. Doesn't necessarily have to be the frame. Honestly, in this case, the frame sits off the ground a little bit. You could take something else nice and flat, and then, you know, honestly, in this case, I could use the other gauge. Probably a better option, actually. Alright, so that's zeroed out. And then what you do is you simply take it. It's got magnets on the side. So you mount that on there. And then what it says is to get your key. You want to turn the wheel so that the beveled edge on the frame, I'll show you in a minute here. First you want to turn that wheel inwards. So right there, it was probably close. Make sure not to bump your frame. Oh, that was almost spot on. This angle right here, you want it parallel with whatever your reference is. The reference in my case is the string itself, so I need to turn that wheel back a little bit. I can just climb through this door. I'm gonna bump the string, obviously. You know what? I'll just play it safe. I'll just take the long walk around. Make sure I don't hit that. I can turn this wheel back just a tiny bit. Let's see how that looks. Just a tiny bit more to the left. Let's see how that looks. As you can see, this process takes a while, but so I maybe went over a little too far, so You know, just little by little, trial and error. Eventually you get a feel for it. All right, there we go. That's running pretty much parallel with the string. So, and can't really tell, but that's almost barely not, what's almost touching. It's still free to move, as you can see. So anyways, zero it out. So that's reading 0, and then what you do is you turn it so that the other bevel is running parallel with the string. So what I do now, I reference on the steering wheel where I'm at, and I turn the wheel, you know, the opposite side at that relative position. So as you can tell, I'm in between the two side spokes. It's a 4-spoke wheel. So I'm actually turning it the wrong way. There we go. All right. So right about there, I'll go take a look. Now we're looking at that bevel. Would you look at that? That's parallel. So what do I have? 1.5 degrees. But wait, that's not my actual cast rating. You need to multiply it by 2. So 1.5 degrees times 2, 3 degrees. I have 3 degrees of caster on this wheel. So that's fine, that's good. These are my old measurements. Let's pretty much disregard those, because we're starting from scratch, essentially. So right front, I was at, I can't remember what the camber was at. I can just look at it later on the video. But right front caster was 3.0 degrees, and that's positive. So an explanation as to why these values are radically different from what I had it at before. I found out these are the wheels and tires that were on the SC400. They're now on my SC300. One of these tires was severely out of round. I think it's this one. Yeah, this tire is very bad. So it was so out of round that as I was driving down the road, the whole car was bouncing up and down. I mean, it's in bad shape. So it is what it is. It was throwing off my readings. But so if I have to redo it, so be it. These tires, you know, they're getting bald, but you know, they're still okay. They're not out of round or anything. Anyways, that's my explanation as to why, after aligning it, I'm at positive 2.85 degrees of camber. But I'll fix that at some point. Anyways, so to adjust your caster, obviously, if you're on double wishbone suspension, it'll be probably a little bit different than McPherson strut. But on these cars, you got an adjustment there and an adjustment there that can be made. Now obviously that shifts the arm in and out. Trying to get it oriented okay. So you can adjust there and adjust right there, that bolt. The upper control arms on these cars by stock ones are not adjustable, so you know there's limits to what you can do on stock suspension, of course. Those are the only adjustments on the lower control arm, those two eccentric bolts. So you use those to adjust your caster and your camber. The reason being we do this before tow is those adjustments will affect your tow, and they did when I did this the first time. It changed my tow pretty drastically. So make those adjustments, get your caster, get your camber where you want it. I'm fine with 3 degrees positive caster. That's great. That's, you know, exactly where I want it, honestly. I like, you know, I like 3. Feels good to me. Camber obviously is way out of whack. When I make adjustments on those eccentric bolts to push the bottom of the tire out, that's gonna throw off my caster. So that's something I'll have to contend with. But that's how you do caster. Camber in the back would be the same. In theory, what you want to do is, you know, do the rear first. You obviously don't have caster adjustment in the rear, but if you square up the strings to the rear, do your camber, make your camber match left rear, right rear, which on this car, you got an adjustment, an eccentric there, and then get that squared up. I covered this in a previous video, but I have the Figs Engineering rear toe links. Get all that squared up, and if your rear runs true, then you will have 0 thrust angle. And then obviously move to the front, do your caster in the front, camber in the front, and then you can go to tow. So again, that's how you do caster. So now I will move on to doing your tow settings. So I got the gauge removed, made sure the string was squared up again. So for tow, you want the gauge in the other orientation, the horizontal orientation to be exact. So same thing, it's still adjusted the same way, so it should be much quicker and easier. Get those 2 fingers on the left on, bring this one out, pull it away, and then there you go. Make sure they're all uniformly seated. Make sure it's relatively level. And then, yeah, so you have these adjustment knobs. You can slide the rulers out. I also sort of give that as a reference to where my, see which one is higher than the other. The space between there and there is a lot bigger than over here, but you know, it's fine as long as it's not really putting pressure, a lot of pressure on the rulers assemblies. So yeah, this is how you do your toe measurement. So first thing you want to do obviously is make sure the steering wheel is straight, and that's pretty straight. And what you'll see other people do is they'll take the seat belt and they pull it all the way out. They pull it all the way out. I can get it all the way out. Anyways, seatbelt's a little torn. That'll be getting replaced anyways. So you pull the seatbelt all the way out, wrap it around the wheel, and then buckle it in. And then you can scoot the seat back, and that'll put more tension on it, and that'll hold this steering wheel straight. I used that method last time and it worked pretty well. Another method I've used before on the IS300, I took a PVC pipe, like a 10-foot long PVC pipe, rolled down both windows, stuck the pipe all the way through both windows, sitting in, just in this one or into this window and out the other window. And then what I did is I made sure the steering wheel was straight, and I took that pipe and I used hose clamps and some towels and whatnot to protect the wheel, and I literally just clamped the PVC pipe to the steering wheel. And what happens then is, if as you're making your adjustments and you're pulling on and tugging on and pushing the steering rack and the wheels, what happens is this wheel will want to turn, but it can't because the PVC pipe is preventing the wheel from rotating. So that's one way to do it. But after doing both methods, I definitely much prefer the seatbelt method. It's a lot nicer, and it looks less goofy, and you don't really run the risk of damaging your steering wheel. So steering wheel is straight, and what we come over here and do is we compare these measurements. So over on this side, if it will focus, which probably not. Anyways, just take my word for it. We are at about 42 millimeters. 42 millimeters. Over here, we are at about 41.5 millimeters. So that's pretty spot on, because I already did the alignment. So I'm about 0.5 millimeters of difference. Now, I've been confused before, and I will likely trip myself up, so I'm gonna have to walk myself through this as well. So every single time. So our reference line is towards me. It's not towards the inside of the car or the center line of the car. It is this string, and this string is sitting on this side of the wheel, and we're measuring from the wheel outwards, not outwards towards the wheel. So we'll just use my numbers that I have. 42 millimeters, 40, let's just say it's 41. So if this is a higher value than that one, that means this string is further away. It's further away from the value, which means, well, the string is fixed because it's fixed in place because of the frame. So if this string is further down on the ruler, if that's fixed, that means this tire is towed in. It's further that way. If I were to take the tire and tow it inwards towards the car, towards the center line of the car, this number will become greater, because in reference to the string, it'll look like it's moving like that as you're turning the wheel inwards via the tie rod ends. So conversely, if this value is lower than that one, guess what? That means the string is closer to the tire. If the string is closer to the tire, guess what? Your tire is towed out. Your tire is closer to the string. That means it's like this, like that. You are towed out. And this is tire specific. We're not comparing front to front, rear to rear, or whatnot. This is this wheel. I have the steering wheel straight. I'm doing this wheel alone. Yes, at the end you could compare front to front, rear to rear, that mainly would be error checking, making sure, you know, if the string frame is squared up, the values, yes, they should ideally be equal, but you know, this is the real world. Yeah, this can also read in degrees. If you have this slid out to the end like I do, you are reading in degrees. I don't know the conversion factor. I'm not doing degrees. I'm not basing anything off of degrees. I'm basing it off of just linear measurement. And I'm going for 0 or as close to 0 in every regard possible in terms of toe, front and rear, just as a baseline. So anyways, that is how you do toe. Obviously, if you needed to make adjustments, you do what, you know, you always do for toe adjustments. You come up under here, you tilt your camera back. These are front rack, so I'm actually looking from the wrong end. The steering rack is located forwards of the ball joints and whatnot. So, right there, you know, you break your nut loose, grab onto the inner tie rod end and make it your toe adjustments. There's hundreds if not thousands of videos on YouTube on how to adjust your toe, and you'd adjust it to whatever setting you want. I'm going for 0 toe, so I want these values to be as close to equal as possible. So that covers toe. And coming up on over here, guess what? That means we're done. We checked our tire pressures, that's easy. Ride height, corner balance, you do that via adjusting the coilovers. If you have coilovers, adjust your caster. Again, gauge in the vertical position, zero out the actual camber gauge here. I recommend zeroing it out on that. The other gauge you can buy too, makes it easier. I recommend that, at least. It's cheaper if you go with one, but anyways, I use that as my 0. With the gauge in the vertical position, set it on there, cut the wheel to where the bevel is, one of the bevels is parallel with the string. 0 the gauge, turn the wheel, set the other bevel is parallel with the string. You get your value, double it, and that gives you your caster. For camber, I should also touch on this. Technically, you're supposed to do the value, I believe, with the gauge in the horizontal position. You want to make sure these are seated equally. Now it's reading 0.8 degrees of negative camber, actually. So that's probably more correct. Maybe. Not entirely sure, just looking at the wheel. Pokes out on the top a little bit, so. But we can look together. Camber measurement, calibration, covers that. Horizontal position. So yeah, so 0.8 degrees negative camber, that's likely what I'm actually at. But yep, so that covers that. We covered camber. Go back to order of operations. Adjust toe. So the camber adjustments was the lower control arm eccentrics, moving those in and out, McPherson strut, it might be different, or it is different actually. I'm not familiar with McPherson strut, so I can't speak on that too much. But on double wishbone, A-arm suspension, 2 lower control arm points, eccentrics can move your lower control arm pickup point in and out, and then, you know, forward and rear for your caster, in and out for camber, and then your toe. So that covers everything. Sorry for not recording it when I had the car actually on the box cribbing and I was making my adjustments, but I had to get the car ready to go. It's now drivable, well, in terms of suspension. No more clunking and weird crazy sounds. Bushings need replacement. They're squeaking. It's a 31-year-old car. I mean, it's from 92. Well, it's a 1992 model, so it's from 91. It's a 31-year-old car. The rubber obviously is going to be a little worn, a little squeaky. But yeah, I'll be continuing to make, you know, more videos and adjustments and, you know, whatnot as I get further and further with this car, learning it. Yeah, it's driving pretty well. Alternator needs replacement, but you know, I'll get into that at a later point. So again, Tenhulzen automotive 4-wheel alignment system. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, anything of that nature, feel free to let me know. I'm accepting of it all. Anything that can make things easier for me, easier for everybody else, I'm willing to share. And I just want to help, you know, push the platform along, because I absolutely love the platform, and frankly I love working on cars, strangely enough. $2J build coming soon, 1UZ build coming soon, other $2J build coming soon. That's not mine, but anyways, have a good one.